So my topic today is professionalizing the application of the Enneagram in Africa. That was the original topic I'd given them in February when they asked me to speak at the conference because of my work I'd done in Africa on the Enneagram. But while I was doing the research, I realized that there was a much bigger thing that I needed to talk about, and that was the personhood and the personality, the African personality, and how cooperation and collaboration is in the fiber of the African personality. So my talk today is in two parts. I will start off with professionalizing the application of the Enneagram in Africa, speak about my experience because that's what I was intended to do here. But I want to go into the second part a little more in depth, and then maybe talk in the third part around what have been some of my observations doing this kind of work in Africa. So to start then, I want to introduce you to my wife, Joy. Joy, can you stand and maybe say hello to everybody?
Hi, Joy.
Joy is part. We have an organization called LEAP. LEAP stands for Learning to Enhance and Develop and Perform. It was the name of a strategy I'd given to a corporate a company that I was the head of learning for here in South Africa. And when I left the corporate, I decided to take that name on as part of my organization. And you'll notice that I designed this logo, and it's actually, I'm a coach, and it's actually, for me, wanting to get out of the headspace, because I was too much in my head. And that is why I designed that logo to be like that. But let me talk a little bit about, so Joy is very instrumental in helping me. If it's not for her, I wouldn't be standing here today to do the work I'm doing. So she's the one that does all of the background support work. When we do the Enneagram assessment, she's the one that actually does the analysis for me. So while I'm on the plane flying, she's busy with that, and I go into the country and I can actually prepare for my presentations because I know what types there are, the subtypes, the number of people belonging to a certain type, all of that stuff she does for me. So thank you very much, Joy. I appreciate that. We have a set of twins, a boy and a girl. Sanya Nomaliso is my daughter, and Dwayne Degi is my son. They're adults, and they live in Johannesburg, and we live in Johannesburg, the south of Johannesburg, in a place called Monday. Joy is also a strict perfectionist. You'll get to know that, and it works well for me because I'm not the perfectionist. If you allowed me to do work, I do work without charging people any money. So you know what type I am already, and I sometimes miss out the 1-0, and so I get very little income from clients because I missed out the 1-0. She would pick that up, and she pick up every error in my invoicing, and that is why we can be successful in the work we do. So thank you very much, Joy. We started this company about 5 years ago. A little bit about myself. I used to be in the corporate. My last job, so I've spent a number of jobs going from being an educationist teaching secondary school English, then to moving into the Department of Education in Gauteng Department of Education here in South Africa, being responsible for school governance and leadership and educational leadership, district-led leadership. I did that for a few years, and then I was very interested in researching leadership, but leadership in the context of schools and disadvantaged communities. So I did that for about 4 years, researching that, living in rural areas, working at the same time with an organization called the Research Triangle Institute, based in North Carolina. It's the largest research park in the world. And I was employed by them to be the education director of a project called the District Development Support Program. Thereafter, I went into APSA. They wanted somebody to restructure, prior to that I was in the parastatals with Denel, doing human resource projects. And then APSA, one of the leading banks in South Africa, wanted somebody to restructure the learning because they were spending a hell of a lot of money in learning, but they were not getting the required return on the investment. And so my interest was piqued on adult learning. And I love NOLS and all of that constructivist-based learning. And so I went into APSA and looked at a new strategy for learning. I did that for about 4 years, and that's when I introduced this concept, LEAP. And then in the process of, very coincidentally, just wanting to find out service providers who could help us to do performance coaching for line managers, because that was the basis on which successful learning strategies would work, right? If line managers took on their responsibilities. I put out a tender for coaching, and the University of Cape Town Center for Coaching was one of the bidders, and they applied to be part of this proposal, and they said, look, why don't you come and do the coaching with us just to experience it first time. I did, and the bug bit. I did my ACC, and then I did my professional coaching qualifications with UCT, and so I'm a PCC graduate from UCT, and that was the life changer for me. And then I realized that I became the head of leadership, learning, and talent for Barclays Africa. That's the 10 countries outside of South Africa. I traveled widely to every one of these countries, doing leadership development, doing learning strategies, getting involved in talent. And between 2011 and 2014, I realized that there was much more I could do than just work for one corporate. And the coaching, grabbed me, and the whole leadership development grabbed me, and I realized I needed to leave the corporate. And I think the PCC journey was an important catalyst, and Hanley, my colleague here, was on the PCC journey with me that same year that we did it together. And as a result, in 2015, I made the decision to leave the corporate and form this organization and move into coaching. And so I do leadership development, I do coaching and group and team effectiveness. That's the work I do with corporates and with other organizations. Any other questions? No? All right, so please, let's make this interactive. Come in whenever you want to, make a comment, just dive in whenever you need to, all right? So, just to give you a sense of the work we've done outside of South Africa, so that it creates some perspective. These are the different clients I've been working with, and with one client, I've done a credit risk program for 9 countries for the same client, and it's on the basis of that work that I'm actually going to be presenting some of my findings today. But I've also worked in Uganda and Kenya and Zambia and Tanzania and Mozambique with branch managers, line managers, team leaders on leadership development programs. And of course, in Swaziland, I've worked with a team on the team effectiveness program. My most recent work has been with this client that I wanted to send it through the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation. And they had a client, I'm not going to mention the name of the client. They had a client who was very involved with some transition that was happening and some change that was happening. And they wanted me to work with 140 people from different parts of the organization to see how we could get them to actually work with the change that was happening, all right? And so that was the wonderful stuff I had done work from February this year, right up until about September. And really enjoyed the work that I did with this, taking them through the journey of change. The interesting thing was that I had introduced them to the Enneagram, not I had introduced them. They were introduced to the Enneagram by one of my clients who said, look, Brian has done some work in Kenya for us. Why don't you ask him, because I think this is powerful stuff. I had a chat to them, they bought the Enneagram, and we used the Enneagram as the basis of the change program in this organization. And I received some very good feedback. And some of those learnings I've built into the paper today. So, with this client here.
I have a question.
Yes, please, tell us.
How did it go there? But then I realized how stupid I am. When you travel around in Africa, for me being from Denmark, Africa is Africa. I know it isn't. I know it's different countries. But is it the same language all over?
No.
It's different than Italy.
We've got 11 official languages just here in our country.
Okay.
11 official languages.
So
that's not telling you all of the other countries.
So when you go to Tanzania, you
just Swahili, they speak Swahili. I don't speak Swahili. I know a few words and greeting in all of these countries. I don't speak Swahili. However, the leadership team that I'm working with, all of these countries besides one country which I'll tell you about, the leadership teams that I'm working with are all conversant in English. And they can understand English, they speak English. English is the language of business in these countries. The only country where there was a difficulty when I went from the level 1, which was the executive level, to the level 1 leadership, people reporting to the executive was Mozambique. Because it was very Portuguese, you know that, Katie. Very Portuguese, and I had to get a translator to work with me to take it down to the level 1s. In all of the other countries, level 1's reporting into the Exco, there were no problems.
Okay.
All right?
What
So the
language do
beauty.
you speak? Sorry, can I ask what languages you
I speak English. I don't even know my mother tongue. My mother tongue is Tamil, and Joy's mother tongue is Telugu. I can understand a little bit of Afrikaans. I don't speak it, but English is my primary language.
And body language.
And this last slide here is interesting. I put it down just to show you that, not the last line, this one, client H. In February this year, I was asked by a major security company, in fact it's the biggest security company in Africa, they're represented in 23 countries. They heard the work that I'd done in the Enneagram, and they said, look, we're getting our MDs, our FDs, and our HRDs from the 23 countries coming into South Africa for a conference. Now, whenever we had them coming down, we only focus on the technical stuff, the 3 days, just the business stuff. We think we'd like to just invite them into talking about themselves a little bit. Would you be interested? And I said, of course. I met the HRD, and the HRD knew me from another organization, and they gave me 3 hours. And I said to her, look, they gave me 3 hours only, yes, of the 3 days. And I said, look, can I indulge you? Would you allow me to at least do an assessment with them? Right? And so we did the integrative 9 assessment, and we sent the question out to the 23 countries in Africa, right? Ivory, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, all of the countries. All 3 of those people, the HRD, FD, and the MD, they did the integral Enneagram assessment. I sent them the reports 2 days before they could fly into the country. And on the day that they arrived, I had all 84 of them around a big room. I said to them, I don't want any tables, just give me chairs, right? It's the largest number I've ever done. And I had the mat, and I took them to the Enneagram, and they liked it so much. It was the beginning of a relationship with this company, and they want me now to coach the MD, FD, and HRD individually on the Enneagram, but also when I get to the country to do the executive team using the Enneagram. So, and I speak about that because there's some wonderful learnings that came through, besides these countries that I'm working in. And so, in a sense, I've got a nice cross-section of working with countries from the north of Africa, the west, east, and I've done a lot of work in South Africa. So, finally, I think I've done about over 1,900 people across Africa, including South Africa, using the integrative 9 assessments. I've debriefed personally, one-on-one, with a number of them, but largely in groups. I do that for my personal coaching. I use the Enneagram for all of my executive coaches, and whenever I have the opportunity of doing team effectiveness work, I try and do it in the Enneagram. I am an accredited Insights Discovery practitioner. I've just been accredited on the Leadership Circle. I use the PERS profile, and of course 1 or 2 other instruments. But whenever I can get the opportunity, I always fall back on the Enneagram because I think, in my bias, I think it's the best thing that any coach can use to coach these coaches. All right. All right. So the outline of my program today, I'm going to talk about the credit bootcamp because that was the ask of me because of the work I've done in Africa. I'm going to the second part, which is the personhood and personality in Africa. I've done some research around this area, and I'd like to share that research with you. I'd like to give you a little bit of some of my observations of my work in Africa, give you some of these little stories that will help you understand what I'm talking about. I've done some feedback survey from the participants in Africa over the last 3 months. I'd like to show you 2 slides that speak about that experience using the Enneagram. And then I'd like to, there's 2 little bits of work I'd like us to do in groups, if we can, because it's going to be very important for us to record that. You'll see as the workshop unfolds where I'd like you to start talking together. And then some areas for future research. Again, as I said, I'd like to make it very interactive. please ask questions as you want to, or make comments, or stop me anywhere you want to go. Some disclaimer though. I'm not an expert either on the Enneagram, even though I've been using it for the last 6 years, nor am I an expert on African personhood and personality. There are people in the room that might know much more than I do. It's my reading. I do have a history honors in African history, focusing on pre-colonialism, because that is my interest as a student. But more than that, I don't know much more than other people around the concept of African personality and personhood. I'm just going to give you some insights into the reading that I've done, and there could be much more than that. There is definitely much more than this. So the area of personality and personhood is still quite young. There's a lot of writing around African personality and personhood, but where it touches on to concepts, to assessments like the Enneagram and other such assessments, very little has been written on it. Okay, and so my limited experience is around the 3 years that I've been working with clients, and of course, I hope that my paper will kind of generate some interest, so that practitioners like you and Enneagram practitioners can actually get their feet wet in the African river, okay, in the river of African personhood. So that's my disclaimer. Good. So in 2015, I left the corporate. I received a call one day from a colleague who said, "Look, this bank is looking for to run a credit boot camp across, their countries, but they're struggling with how do you make it stick?" Those of you that are in learning know that we send people for learning, right, for training programs. After a few months, it's gone. It doesn't stick. And they said, "How do we make this thing stick? We're spending so much money training our credit people and our finance people and so on." So I said to them, "Look, I think I've got the answer. Let's have a call. Let's have a discussion." I went in, met the head of the credit department, and I said, "I'd like to suggest that you actually build in a component of self-knowledge, self-awareness, and self-development." And he said, "Why should I do that?" I said, "Because if people own this, if they can see this and how it links to themselves and why they need to do this, there's a greater chance that when you are not there, they're going to continue doing it." It's the whole idea of sustaining this thing. And so he said, "Look, I'm not sure what you're doing, but let's try it." And I introduced the idea of the Enneagram. I said, "Look, I know this wonderful tool. If you do the Enneagram with this group of people, it might just work, right?" So he said, "Look, I'm not sure what you're doing, but try it." And so what happened was that he said, "Take it to one country, but I'm going to ask you to take it to Mauritius. I don't want to take it to an African, take it to Mauritius, because we've got a cross-section of people living there, and if it works there, I'm sure you'll be able to work in any other country in Africa." So we said, "All right." So in 2015, that request came in. There's the invitation there, the soft skills. I took it to Mauritius in 2016. I worked with another colleague that was a specialist on credit skills and finance skills, Charles. So he was a specialist in the hard technical skills. I came in on the soft skills side, and we combined together. We ran a 5-day program, but I said to him, "Look, before I do this, can I do a mini performance analysis?" Now, those of you that know the performance analysis world, I'm a performance analyst. I'd like to go and, Barisha, when people ask you, "Please come, learning manager, and put in a program for me," the learning manager will go in and just give off-the-shelf stuff, right? What the performance analyst does, goes behind that and says, "Let me understand what is the need here. And if I can understand the need, it'll help me to understand the kind of solution I can provide to you," right? So I said to them, "You want me to do this work in the credit analyst team. Let me understand what the need is." And I did a quick performance analysis, and it was amazing. I found that no matter how much you train people, it's not going to solve the problem. There was an underlying root cause that had to be addressed. All right, and so this performance analysis, what it showed to me was that, there we go. It showed to me that the coverage team, that's the relationship managers, sales managers, and the credit team were operating in silos. They didn't talk to each other. They were sitting on different floors. They had different managers, and there was actually this internal competition within that particular organization. It was plain to see what the problem was, right? There was a lack of trust between both the teams. The customers were experiencing them as two separate organizations coming together. They would ask the same, the same. They would ask the same questions. They would go back and say, "Aren't you from the same organization?" Yes, so yeah, right? It was inappropriate, incomplete, and poor quality of the credit papers that were being written by this particular organization. Okay, the targets were not met. The income wasn't being generated. There was very low morale because of performance issues, and both the credit team and the coverage team in this particular organization, performance was low. So I did the performance analysis. This was the outcome of the performance analysis. So by the way, the countries that, okay, let's just go here. The performance analysis. I did it in Mauritius. We did a 5-day program. I'm going to talk to you about the design of the program very quickly because I think in it will be the seeds of some of the success that we've had, right? So, the outcome we put for ourselves was, how do we get these two teams to start working together? How do we, and for me, what was interesting was, before we actually get these teams to work together, I needed for them to take a look into themselves. And who am I? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my blind spots? What trips me up? What triggers me? And I thought, wow, the Enneagram would be an excellent way to introduce that. And so on day one then, we'd start with talking to them about the Enneagram, right? So here's the outline of the program. I would set the stage on day one, talk to them about it. Remember, they would have got the assessments. I would then go in and run the workshop with them around the Enneagram, right? On an open mat. Very, very unheard of in this group because they were fond of the old formal way of doing training. And here was I'm coming with all of these exciting maths and so on. And in the afternoon, we broke the day up so that in the morning I would do the personal stuff, personal development stuff. In the afternoon, my colleague would go in with the hard technical stuff, right? On every day, we would do some bits of personal development work. And so in the next day, after understanding self, we then went into how do you understand the other, and I would do communication skills using the Enneagram, right? How does the 8 communicate? What works for the 5? If you want to get through to the 1, what you should be doing, etc. I did that stuff on day 2, and on day 3, we then go into negotiation skills using the Enneagram, right? And then of course, conflict handling was an important part because there were these 2 groups of people, and we did the building of trust using the Enneagram. So negotiation theory, conflict handling was there. Interestingly enough, we used this island of opportunity game. Any of you heard of this island of opportunity game? It's a lovely game where I divide the group into, and at this time I put them into the different Enneagram. So each group had a different Enneagram type. There were about 4 or 5 or 6 people in each group, and each one was a tribe. And the story is that this is an island. You are supposed to be dividing the island, and I would give each amongst you, and each of the tribes was given a handout that had the minimum, what the people were telling them. For example, there was one tribe that said our gods lived on the mountain, so you don't give up the mountain because our gods live there. So you could come to divide the mountain. So they had to keep the mountain undivided. Another tribe, and all the instruction said was that you needed fresh water and you needed access to the beach, right? You needed fresh water, you needed access to the beach, right? To divide the island. Give them an hour and sit back and watch how the 8s would take the pen and say, right guys, this is how we're going to do it. And how the 9s would just give in and accommodate. And how the 2s would think about giving the land to other people rather than worry about. It was amazing. And this was on the day 3, that I then took them through the island game and then gave them possible scenarios and reflected on how the kind of tension in the teams is because of our Enneagram types, right? And how it was beautiful watching that. On the Thursday of the day 4, I would then do lines of integration with them. By now, they understood a little bit about themselves, their blind spots. An interesting thing I do with them, I'm using blind spots. You may want to do this in your workshops, those of you that run the Enneagram workshops, is, normally as a facilitator, I ask them to put the cell phones away, right? You do that, right? Because you don't want any interruptions. On day 2, I tell them, take your cell phones out, put them on. I want you to go onto your WhatsApp, take a picture of the blind spots, and send it to 3 or 4 friends of yours. and tell them, what do you think? Do you think it's true of me? And I tell you what, guys, it works there, because by the time the afternoon is up, they're buzzing around, oh, look at what this person says. Wow, you know, and it's in real time, people are giving you feedback, so just a hint for you, okay? All right, so we do the island game, and on day 4, we do the lines of integration. I actually make them walk the mat. The most powerful part of the program, as I will show you later on, is the lines of integration, lines of development. Where do you move to under stress? Where do you move to under release? Now that it's like a light bulb comes on for participants, right? At the so on day 5, we normally give them a presentation to do, the coverage and the credit teams together in joint teams, and they've got to do it in the presence of the exco. So the management sits at the back, these guys, and they are presenting. They don't present as a coverage team, as a credit team separately, jointly, and they're presenting to a client. It's amazing how by then the cooperation builds into the team, right? At the end of the day, on day 5, they make commitments to the team, right? And we send them, this is an example of a report. This is a report of Kingston from Zambia. I've taken his surname out to protect the innocent. But you'll see, this is actual report, by the way, because during the week, in the evenings and lunchtimes, I do individual coaching with participants. Some of them have come to the hotel at 7 in the morning before I start the day, because there are some serious issues they need to deal with. And so I do individual coaching. We give them these individual reports with their commitments at the end, right? And they do personal development plans. But what's interesting is that in the section A and B here, we actually speak about behavior. And we speak Enneagram, a quite specialist 5, some of the things that the 5 that I've picked up as a coach, but also some generic stuff around the 5. And we give them some reading material. Every single participant gets that as they go back home, right? At the back home, this comes to them a week later. Right? So this is the report. These are some of the comments that have been given to me. I just put some of them. It was an exciting program that integrated credit and coverage teams. It was different and spicy. It was an eye-opener. Many people said it was an eye-opener. And it was great. You know, I'm short of words to thank you for the inspiration that I got from you guys, etc. There's some pictures here. So our very first bootcamp in Mauritius, 2016, November. This was the Ghana one that we did. Mozambique called us twice. Dar es Salaam, this company called us 3 times with 3 different groups in 1 year, 2017. Because other people were hearing about, you know, what is happening, and please, you know, do it for our groups as well. We walked the lines of development in Seychelles. This exercise here is around conversational skills, using the Enneagram. This one was, communication styles and types in Uganda. This was in Lusaka, Zambia. Making commitments. Development action plans in Gaborone, Botswana. This was outside in Zambia. It was a very hot day and we couldn't sit in the room, so we took the mat outside. And it was unreal, you know, how when we go out of the office space, you know, out in the open, how the Enneagram takes a different feel. We found the same thing happening in Uganda. I did it under the tree because the room was just too small and the rain started. Wow, you should have asked Joy the condition of the mat when we came home. Blind spots, they're unraveling blind spots in Gaborone, Botswana. This was in Kenya. So some pictures around that. So interesting. When I was asked to do, so we got very good anecdotal feedback around the program, right? The managers would say, altogether we've done about between 18 and 20, I think, of these credit boot camps, and it's still happening from 2016. We've changed the design, but I needed to know, okay, so it's good when we leave, people say, great program, we're all excited. Is that impact still felt after we leave, right? So 3 months ago, in preparation for this conference, I sent out a questionnaire through SurveyMonkey to 960 participants, because we've covered around that number in the credit bootcamp. We got back the results for about 64 participants, but I only focused this time on the credit bootcamp participants, not on all of the other people I've done programs. And I sent the questionnaire out to about 150 participants from the Bank B, the one in the World Bank, the one I was commissioned from the World Bank to do. I wanted two things. I wanted to know, well, how did people feel about the usefulness of the Enneagram in terms of, how do I communicate with types, understanding my communication style, understanding my stress levels, understanding my blind spots, understanding my weaknesses and strengths, right? 86% of the people said they found it very useful, 11% said useful, around understanding my strengths and weaknesses. 78% of the people said my blind spots, yes, very useful, and 20% said useful, so kind of 98% usefulness. Understanding my colleagues' Enneagram type, 63. Understanding my stress levels, 60% of them said they found it very useful. Understanding my communication style, and how do I communicate other types, over 70%. So it was saying to us then that we were doing something which helped them around how do I communicate. Because one of the big problems we saw in these countries, in all of the countries that we worked with, was communication was a big barrier. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on around this component. But we also want to know from them, look, how did you experience the idea around collaborating? How did you collaborate before? And after the Enneagram, how did you then collaborate, right? So before the training, they said it was excellent collaboration in teams. Very good, 15% very good, 35% good. After the training, 23% excellent, so it's a raise of 13% here. But look at this, very good, 15 to 53%. And so it was saying to us that maybe the way they were experiencing collaboration, remember, in some cases like Ghana, which was the second one we did in February 2017, it was like about 2.5 years after we had done this. And people were still finding it very useful. In one country, I won't tell you the name of the country, they even, on the basis of the feedback, they took the credit and coverage people and they put them together, to sit together. And they went a step further, they said, look, the incentives for your bonuses will be based on the same criteria, not different. Okay, and that is a major shift for us. So, why did I go to this? Because I taught cooperation and collaboration to other companies, right? And it was, people found it very useful. And then I taught cooperation and collaboration using the Enneagram. Okay? So when I did with companies, for example, this Israeli company I worked with, they said, great stuff happening, okay? So I did with an Israeli company using the Enneagram. The MD was a great guy, he's a great guy, an Israeli MD. He had an Israeli, part of his expo was Israeli, Georgian, South African. And they found a lot of usefulness using the Enneagram. When I did it in Africa though, the significant thing was that when I did it with the Israeli company, I didn't know whether it was really the Enneagram that was creating the powerful cooperation and collaboration. I couldn't put my finger on it to see whether it was that, right? When I did it in Africa, I wanted to know, was it the finance skills that you guys were attending? Or was it the credit skills that you guys were attending? Or was it the Enneagram that really built in this cooperation and collaboration? And so I wanted the feedback from colleagues about the Enneagram. But the second thing was that I wanted to see if there was enough literature on it that spoke to the idea around collaboration and cooperation. And that's why I went this route around digging into the stuff that we're doing in Africa. Because it just dawned on me one day that there's something happening here that we might be missing out on if we didn't explore it even further, right? And that something was around the traditional African personhood and personality.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
What's the difference between personhood and personality?
All right, so I want to make this very, very interesting here, right? Would like to answer before I give you my view. Yes.
I'll have a brief guess.
Maybe your name first and then, yeah?
My name is Ingrid, and I do quite a lot of work in the higher education sector where they're talking a lot about decoloniality and African philosophy and higher education. And my guess at the distinction would be that personhood is quite a fundamental philosophical concept, whereas personality is actually quite a Western construct, and that decoloniality of psychology would involve throwing out the idea of personality potentially. I don't know, that's my guess.
Absolutely, great stuff. Great stuff. So as I'll show you just now, Africa, we in Africa have been bombarded with a lot of Western imperialism, colonialism, Western ideas, all right? And the whole concept of personality has been very individualistic. One of the books that one of the books that used to be my Bible as I was growing up as a youngster and as I went into first year university was Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. Did you read The Fountainhead?
Yeah.
So those of you that read The Fountainhead know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Objectivism, individuality, and I lived that, right? Until I became a political activist. I joined the ANC. I began to community organizing, and my focus shifted, right? And when my focus shifted, I realized there's something different about personality and personhood. There's the whole concept of personhood is much, much bigger than the narrowly defined personality. Make sense, class?
Yeah.
Right? Lovely. But I'll be speaking about both today. And so please, wonderful, ask me those questions, okay? So, we've been through colonialism, imperialism. Africa has gone through now Eastern immigration and imperialism, the influence of Christianity and Islam on traditional African culture. All of this is people asking the question, man, is African personality really viable and valid, or is it just romantic nonsense? Before the arrival of the European colonialists, right, and the imperialists, people thought Africa was a kind of blank map. It wasn't a blank map. No, we've had, it wasn't like nothing was here. It wasn't like dark Africa. Even though the Belgians and the French and the British might think of Africa like that. We had well-established governments. We had political systems, traditions, worldviews, philosophies, cultures that were here and that were existing here. So it wasn't like nothing. There were many African countries and societies were structured and stable. There's a long history of political, social, cultural, and economic development. So, in a sense, when we start talking about the African personality and personhood, it's based on a richness that we had here, which was different from the Western world, but a richness nevertheless, an amazing richness. And I want to say that, when we think about the evolving of African cultures, let's not make the mistake. Culture evolves, adapting itself to new circumstances and environments. New ideas come from the outside to replace older ideas or to be blended with existing ones. Culture and society can be fluid, reflecting on ongoing adaptation. From Tholola in The Power of African Cultures. The point is, cultures don't remain stagnant. They change. They impact on. And so we must understand that in Africa as well, living here, all across Africa, we've been impacted by other cultures that have been coming in. Okay? Now, I'm sure most of you know of Upstairs. It's not the same Upstairs that was spoken of this morning. But this Upstairs wrote about 3 levels of uniqueness, the human mental program. Human nature is universal, right? Upstairs says the Russian professor in Russia and an Aboriginal in Australia, they have what we call human nature. Human nature, how we sing, we laugh, we cry, we feel pain, we enjoy experiences. All of us do that. It's inherited, all right? It's inherited. Of course, how we express that joy, what we do with that joy, and how we handle that pain, and how we interpret that experience is mediated through our culture, all right? That's learned behavior. It's learned, and it's specific to a group or a category of people. You know that, okay? And even within a country, there are many different cultures, and how each one of those cultures mediates that will be different. Personality, though, is specific to an individual. and it's inherited and learned. I am who I am because of nature and of nurture. Taking up some of my father's genes. My father is 94 years old. He's still alive and kicking.
Wow.
My mother is late. You know, she passed away of diabetes when she was 59 years old. But I've taken a lot of my father. He loved running, and so I love running, and I love keeping fit, and so I'm like him. He's bald, and I'm kind of bald. My son is bald, So like I'm a factor of my nature and my nurture, the way I've been brought up. My mom was a strict disciplinarian. She had a cane, and she caned me until I was in matric. Kind of strict disciplinarian. So I'm a factor of my parents, but also the way I was brought up, right? Of course, the difference between how I see the world, right? The difference between what the world is my lens that I look at it. Dirk could be seeing something, and he could be seeing something very different than what I'm seeing. I think it was Carl Jung who spoke about our mountains of perceptions. I always use this example, Dirk, when I'm teaching in Johannesburg, and I say to people, you stand on Table Mountain and you look from Table Mountain and you look at, and I ask you, Dirk, should I come to Cape Town? And Dirk is standing on the top of Table Mountain and looking at the beautiful Victoria Embankment, the sea, and all of the beautiful, surroundings. And he says, yes, Brian, Table Mountain, Cape Town is beautiful. Please come. And then, of course, somebody else is standing on the same mountain, but looking down, Guguletu, Nyanga, or whatever, and seeing all the pain and the misery and the dirt and the filth. Do I come? No, don't come. It's not. We stand on our mountains of perception, right? And please remember that it's our personality, it's our human nature and our culture that it's very important to understand when we speak about our personality and our personhood. Now, when I tried to research to see, look, how can we actually define Africans in Africa? And I found a very good structure by this writer, Petzer, right? Petzer gave us these three. He spoke about I'm going to try and pronounce this word in Zulu, Amabinka. Am I right? These are traditionalists who remain tied to the tradition. That's the tribal way of life, right? The second group we found, the Amakolwa. They follow the Western ideologies and are mostly Christian. It's unreal how Christianity, Pentecostal Christianity, has kind of seeped into the life of African people in Africa.
Isn't that because of the missionaries?
Yes, of course.
Schools?
Yes. But now, recently, over the last 30 years, the rise of Pentecostalism has been just like this. It's like, I was in Kenya. I was driving from the airport and I saw this long queues of people with plastic containers. And I asked the driver, is there a water shortage? He said, no. They actually went to the church. They went to the minister to get holy water. It was like this Pentecostalism that has been grabbing hold of people across Africa, right? And the rise of Islam and Christianity. So people who follow the Western ideologies, mostly Christian, they are very strongly opposed to traditionalism, and they actually view it as pagan and primitive. Right? In fact, it gives them the reason, it gives them a kind of the discipline and integrity when there's a breakdown of tribal groupings and people are anxious. Christianity is your answer, right? And that's why we find the rise of these of Pentecostalism in Africa. The third group is the this was the typical one.
That's it, Juicy.
Yeah, Awantana, right? These are this is the group that borrows from the first world and the third world, right? They kind of a crossover cultural zone, neo-traditionalists, and they constitute the largest group. Okay? So those were Petzer gave us these three groups. Boone, another researcher, he coined this word third world takers. He says these are those who turn their back on traditions and discipline, and in so doing, also to the closeness of community and Ubuntu. I'm going to introduce the word Ubuntu to you now. but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it as we go into the presentation. They replace it not with the best of the first world, but often with the worst of the first world, right? They are self-serving and care nothing for the community other than what they can get, what it can deliver to them personally, right? They seek to take and not to share. They are takers that have neither integrity nor discipline. So keep this structure in mind. The first one around traditionalists, the second one around the people who largely follow the Western traditions, strongly opposed. The third one were straddle both, first and third world, and the last one were the third world takers. So, when you look at an African personality and personhood, there's a sense that, man, there's so many different cultures, there's so many different iterations of culture in Africa, right? It's confusing. However, I looked into the research to see, are there some common precepts cutting across all of the cultures in Africa? And I found some interesting work done on this, and I kind of sifted out some of the more important precepts, and I'd like to present that to you, all right? And as we go through them, keep that in mind, because this is going to tell you a little bit more around the traditional African concept of personality and personhood. The first one, nothing exists in isolation. Nothing exists in isolation, all right? Life is sacred. It's a communion of souls and transcends the limitations of space and time. How often time is such an important thing, right, for the Western world, right? Huh? And then you go to these to the workshops sometimes all across Africa, and I'm waiting for the people to come in, and it's always there. Hey, it's okay, Brian. It will happen. It's happening. It will happen. Huh? And our notion of time, which is another paper on its own, right? Life is it transcends the limitations of space and time. Life is cyclical. It's not linear. Okay. I like this. A constant renaissance requiring an inner renewal of humankind to keep pace with the renewal occurring in the cosmos. These are all the precepts on the reading I've done. Life cannot be evaluated from a linear perspective. The natural world is imbued with power beyond that which can be understood by Western logic. Intuitive reasoning is important and very sophisticated. There is a vital force in people, plants, and inanimate objects that is not time-bound, making the past as important as the present. Not all forces are equal, and one must discover one's relation to the other forces. The human being is not just a vital force, but a vital force in participation with the other forces. African humanism, again the word Ubuntu, is inherently anti-individualistic, pro-communalistic, working in communities, the whole concept of togetherness, very spiritual, not in the sense of religion, but spirituality, transcendental, and moving away from the center. Right? And I thought that was an interesting kind of golden thread running through the literature review of African cultures that I came across. Respect, Mbike and Mari, actually the two writers that really impressed me around this, they spoke about respect, dignity, solidarity, compassion, and survival as the 5 fingers of Ubuntu. I tried to get a picture done. It's beautiful, isn't it? Respect for the other, dignity, solidarity, compassion, and survival. African society is other-centered, and living is about cooperation, not competition. And finally, the self in relation to the other is the focus of individual experience. The self is an intimate relationship with other people and with the animate and inanimate world of nature, the ancestors and spirits. Okay. I'll flash this up again, but what I'd like you to do, and those of you who want to take a picture of it, because what I'd like to do now is just pause, given these precepts of African personality, I'd like us to have a little conversation in smaller groups if we can. And Let's hear some comments. Let's go here. Anything you want to tell us? Anything that came up for you?
Somebody else, because I spoke too much.
No, because you said so.
One of the stories prompted a memory for me about a very felt difference in cultures, for example, and it was felt for me because don't regard myself as very social or like an individual. And yet when I lived in London for years long ago, I suddenly realized how you miss the communal thing of just acknowledging and greeting people, which is not done maybe for very good reasons, but there was a lack of, it was something I took for granted.
Yeah.
Where here we would greet someone before we get down to business, or you get greeted on a telesales call before someone tells you something.
Yeah.
But it's you don't acknowledge, you don't look in the eyes, you don't cross the barrier between individuals. And it was a very noticeable thing, something as coaches maybe one would have to be very sensitive to, in very subtle ways. Remember the community, the fact that we take for granted that everyone is very good. If you work with someone from that culture, you have to be more sensitive to different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
You make me think about an experience that I had working in the last corporate job. So we had, I'll tell you, it was APSA, they were bought by Barclays. And so we had a number of British, directors coming and working in here. And so, you would get the British director walking in, your open floor office from the entrance, walking right to the end, and just going to his desk and generalizing, but largely the experience that we as South Africans felt, and working on his computer and getting on, South African guy will come in the morning with a South African lady. Hi, how are you? Kitty, how are you doing? Good to see you. and then, and going around the room and saying, how was the experience? By the time he gets to the table, it's about 15 minutes gone, and the British guy is anxious, the manager is anxious. This is a bank, when are we going to start working, And so I was doing this team effectiveness as well, and it came out in the workshop. And so we asked the British leader, what is happening? He says, no, you know what? It's so irritating when people take so long to get to the desk to do the work. And the African employee said, it's so irritating when you don't pick your head up to even say hello to me.
That's
Get it?
So it's a little, we talked about in this group that it's a little like the European style is more like self-preservation, where Africa is more like social.
And not only that, what the African guy is doing is team building. And we know people work far better when they feel some relationship to team than being isolated and on their own. So intuitively, this is a far smarter way.
And in the long run, it saves time.
Yes.
Yes.
In the long run, it gets better results, it's more sustainable.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. That group. Yes, please.
So I was about to say,
Yes.
I was listening earlier, I used to go to China a lot. And what I experienced was a little bit of this, family oriented,
Yes.
get to know you first, don't trust you until I know you, and that takes time. And this is what I see here now. I'm from America and none of that applies.
It's Brexit. In that group, would you like to say something about your discussion?
Yeah, he's spoken for us.
Spoken already? That group? Any comments? Some nice discussion there.
We do.
Okay. We actually focus on the second last African society,
Yes.
and we disagree with the statement.
Uh-huh.
We said it all depends where you come from and your perspective, and we made this an example with Cape Town, basically the rest of the country. Okay, and actually we made Cape Town and Joburg the two main hubs, economical hubs. When you come to Cape Town, the vibe is different. It's beautiful, but it's not warm. And we said, can we remove race out of it? Because I was born and bred in Soweto, and then I came to school here. part of my high school and I studied here potentially. So I lived here for 8 years. And nothing in me says I must come and settle here. Or even have a holiday with my family here. I would come here if I have to come to a funeral because now I've got relatives here.
Yeah.
Or like now, business, really. So Cape Town, another thing is the disparity is too much. The social standards. It's too big.
Rich and poor.
It's too big.
When you look at the way that we are living here in South Africa, right?
Yeah.
And in other parts of Africa as well, and I've traveled across Africa, you get a sense that are we really other-centered when we see the poverty, when we see the big divide of wealth and poor, when we see the privileged and the underprivileged, are we really other-centered? I'm arguing in this little discussion that inherent in the African culture is the other-centeredness. What has happened to us is that we've become, our personality has been affected. And I'm saying to us, can we not get back there?
Yeah.
Isn't that the glimmer of hope that we have? All right? And that's what's important for us. And so I'm so glad you raised that, because that gives us this nice segue into talking about the other concepts I'm going to speak around, especially of Ubuntu, that I want to introduce us to now, right? Last comment from this group. Thank you.
One of the thoughts was working with the Enneagram and the 9 types, people are conscious of, I know all of these as part of humanity. I have seen them all around me in the communities where I grew up. I see them in myself. And so using the Enneagram seems to have an incredibly easy fit in African culture. Certainly I work a lot with groups of African women. And it's a very useful model for understanding that idea of Ubuntu, being somebody through your relationship with other people. Particularly when you're working with the lions, people have a sense of, oh my, when I'm in this kind of space, I go to that part of me so as to be appropriate in that kind of
Absolutely,
space.
absolutely. Couldn't have said it better, right? So this concept of Ubuntu is I am because we are. All right, I am because we are, and it's such an amazing concept about a person is a person through other persons. And this is Tutu's words. None of us comes into the world fully formed. We would not know how to think or walk or speak or behave as human beings unless we learnt it from other human beings. We need other human beings in order to be human. And maybe it's something which I'd invite you to memorize before you left South Africa on Sunday or next Tuesday or whenever you're leaving. Is
If we leave.
Ubuntu. I'm not sure whether my pronunciation is right. Ubuntu Ngabadu.
No.
No, say it nicely for us.
I can't stop saying it this
Say it.
Ubuntu ngabantu. It rhymes.
Say slowly for them.
Ubuntu ngabantu.
Can we all have a go at it? Say it to the first one. Say it. Ubuntu. The next one.
Ngabantu.
Right, you got it? This is a person because of people. Right? And that's a discussion around the individual personality versus the collective. Right? Which is so important in understanding African personality. Mandela said, the Ubuntu philosophy doesn't mean that people should not address themselves to a problem. No. But it does imply that they should look at what they are doing will enable or empower the community around them and help it to improve. And so often we can get euphoric about the concept of Ubuntu, being this kind of thing that's just touchy-feely stuff. I'm saying it doesn't have to be that way. It's real, and if you listen to Hetty's comments around how the nine types of Enneagram, if you look at the society that we're living in, and looking at the way we can see the Enneagram working in them, we can bring Ubuntu alive. Okay, I like this quotation from Pullman, Detroit, and Engelbrecht in 2006. Practicing the Ubuntu philosophy unlocks the capacity of an African culture in which individuals express compassion, reciprocity, dignity, humanity, and mutuality in the interest of building and maintaining communities with justice and communalities. Nicely said. Nicely summarized, isn't it? Okay, so René discusses, the Western philosophy around actualizing self. I think, therefore I am. All right? In Africa, I feel, I dance the other, and therefore I am.
Yeah.
Makes a difference, right? Because the idea around Western tradition is that I need to actualize the self. I need to kind of realize the self. And the traditional African personhood says, I cannot actualize the self in the absence of the other. Makes a difference. And so as we talk about personality and personhood, and we speak about the Enneagram, I'm hoping that you would leave with a different lens around how we look at the types in the Enneagram, how we look at personhood in the Enneagram. Okay. So, my time is running out, so I'm going to go into a little bit in the third part of my discussion, which is the implications of this kind of concept of a person, this communitarian concept of a person. And I like what Guy says about it. He says that the human person does not voluntarily choose to enter into human community. That is, it's not optional. Talking about the African personality and personhood, right? It's there. He doesn't choose it, it's there. That the human person is at once a cultural being, that the human person cannot, perhaps must not, live in isolation from others, that the human person is naturally oriented towards other persons and must have a relationship with them, and that the social relationships are not contingent but necessary. Okay? So, I'm going to skip one or two of the exercises because of time and I need to get through the paper. I was actually asked us, and it's a wonderful thing, I wish we had time to do, how does each of the type promote or contribute to this concept of personality and personhood, but specifically in the African context, because I want you now to put on the African hat, as we sit here. And secondly, how does it work against the idea of contribution and cooperation and collaboration? And I wish we had some time a little later on for us to do that. I don't think we can get to it. I would have loved to have had a conversation about this. But let me talk about some of my observations of my work using the Enneagram. And my observations might be right or wrong, it might be relevant or not, but let me share with you my observations, okay? So firstly, you know, the whole Western tradition, is around looking at, and it comes from the theory, Darwin's theory of evolution. It also comes from the Judeo-Christian concept of, I need, you know, in the Bible, take control over nature, survival of the fittest, right? And what is it? That's the ethos, isn't it? And because of that, our values and customs from the Western tradition is one of competition, separateness, individual rights. And what does it result in? Our modalities, individuality, uniqueness, differences. This is the Western world, isn't it? This is the Western view of the world. In the African concept of the world, the African view of the world, look, this is not control over nature, but somebody said it here earlier. It's one with nature. It's this union with nature. And it's not the survival of the individual, it's the survival of the tribe. The survival of the team, the survival of the group. See the shift from individual to community? Here the values and customs would be cooperation, interdependence, not independence, interdependence, and collective responsibility. And as a result, our modalities are communality, sameness, and groupness. And see how different it is when we look at building this into the concept of African personhood. So that was my first observation. My second observation, as I went across doing this work in Africa, I looked at the three centers, the head, heart, and gut. And as I began to work with people in Africa, the other participants, I realized that there was something else that was happening here, especially as I walked the lines of integration. As we moved from a 2 to an 8, and I would move people from a 2 to a 4, and looked at where do you go to under stress, and we actually did that. I had to walk, I had to drag people across the line sometimes to move to the space of, that getting, right? But I realized, man, there's something else here. There's something else than just the head, heart, and gut. And it's what Alex Kigami from Rwanda, actually, when I read his work, kind of the light bulb came on for me. You're speaking about, he calls it shadow. I'd like to call it an animating force or a spirit. Because the word shadow, in the kind of Western tradition, will have different connotations. Here, the spirit. What I think is happening here, as we do the Enneagram in Africa, the personality of African people is, yes, the head, heart, and gut, but also the fourth dimension around the spirit. And it's something I'm suggesting might be an area of research for some of us as Enneagram practitioners to do in the next conference. The whole concept, right? The third thing, African culture is very expressive. This is my observation. I mean, when I do my workshops, I always have music. I've got music from all the countries and I play it. You know, some of the music I play before you enter the room, right? And generally, people are not sitting, they're dancing into the room and they're moving and there's beats in the room, right? So it's very expressive. It's about kinship. African culture is about daily life, religion, language, music, expression, art, all of that. And you would have seen that happening here, right? Klaus was telling me about color. He says, he was speaking to Joy and I when we came into the room, and he said, you know, when I go to the other countries, I see black and white. Yeah, I come and see the exuberance of color. Africans give more immediate and direct expression to all contents of the consciousness through song, dance, oratory, painting, sculpture. So I've learned to build that into my workshops in Africa. In fact, my son, as I was telling him about this, he said, Dad, why don't you use, did you see The Greatest Showman on Earth? And I said, all right, tell me, and I hadn't seen the film by then. I saw the movie, and he showed me this particular clip that I now show in my Enneagram workshops, and it's This Is Me, the song This Is Me. And it's wonderful lessons in that story. The fourth thing around my observation was the stories and storytelling. Dirk, you heard him say this morning, you know, we kind of don't do justice to the whole concept of storytelling, right? And so in the workshops, I find in the Enneagram workshop, what helps, especially in Africa, is storytelling. And so I would say things like, you know, I was in Ghana, and I had an Enneagram type 7, who was a fantastic visionary. She was working in the bank, but she had 3 other businesses. She had a water bottling business, coconut water bottling business. She had a manager running that business. She had a dress design business, Ghanaian dress design business for export, and she had somebody running that. And she had a creche that she was running for the parliamentarians, right? And she was getting up in the morning and doing all of this stuff. And I said to her, and she was highly stressed. And she still, she was an investment banker. So I said to her, but man, and she came to me for coaching. She said, Brian, I've got to talk to you. And I said, you're such a successful entrepreneur. You know, what's happening? She says, I can't leave my job as an investment banker because my mom wants me to be this banker. She was a single mom. Oh. My dad left us when I was 12 years old. She sent me to college. She wanted me to be a banker. And my mom will never allow me to leave the bank because the bank is a status job. And she said, a small business, no matter how successful I am in Ghana, small business is a swear word, it's a scum. No matter how rich you are, if you have a small business, you're not as great as being a banker. And so she said, I'll have to wait for my mom to die if I have to leave this bank. What type do you think a mom was? And the mom would say, is that the shirt you're wearing with that pants? Look at your shoes. Where's your makeup? Are you going to visit the client? 3. The mom was a 3. She was a 7. All right? And then you got these personalities operating in her life. And she can't not listen to her mom because of the loyalty she felt towards her mom. Right? My heart went out to her. So I hear these stories when I'm teaching the Enneagram. And people just grab it. I was in Zambia. And a guy was an active controller. He was standing on the mat as an 8. And people said, how come you became this active controller? He said, my dad's got 2 wives. I'm the eldest of the second mother. There's 16 children in all. I'm the number 9, but of my. And he said, well, we lived in the same compound. There were two houses. I had to fight my brothers and sisters for the food, for clothing, for money, because my father's first wife would never allow us that privilege. And so I became an active controller. I had to fight, I had to protect, I had to defend. Nature and nurture, right? And I use an example to bring out the reality of an 8. Last example, a story of somebody in Kenya when I was doing this work. And she said, Brian, you know, I wish I had met the Enneagram. This happened this year. I wish I'd met the Enneagram before. I said, why? She said, you know, I'm an 8 and active controller. Now I know why my husband divorced me. Now I know why we had to break up. Why? Because I'm powerful. I'm too powerful. And in the African village that I come from, a woman is not supposed to be more powerful than the man. And he couldn't take my strength, he couldn't take it. Because in my culture, in my village, the woman should be subservient to the man. And she said, I wish I'd known this because now I can see where we were. I know he still loves me. I know I love him. but the influence of the family and the mother and the culture wouldn't make it happen. So I say these stories just to bring out the illustration of the types, and it works beautifully. And people start opening up, right? And so storytelling and stories are very important. But another important thing I notice, and something which you should explore if you're working in Africa, is how we need to challenge the corporate's ethos.
Yes.
Right? We need to challenge it. Here's 3 examples. The first example is performance management. So we teach cooperation, we teach collaboration, and then the corporate world comes in with individual targets. Individual targets. It accents this divide between individualism and competition from the West and this pull towards collaboration and community in Africa. Right? This focusing on individual targets. I can tell you, every single country I've worked with, the biggest complaint they have is, we don't like this performance management system.
Yeah.
Why? Because it feeds the individualism and not the ethos of communality in the African traditional culture. The second one, giving and receiving feedback. So the first one is very relevant in all of the countries. This one was particularly true in Tanzania. Because I would teach communication skills. And people would say, but Brian, it's difficult to give feedback. How do I give feedback to somebody? Because when I give difficult feedback to them, I'm saying to them, I don't like you. You know, in our culture, I can't do that. And so this is an actual quote from somebody in Tanzania. Enneagram is relevant to me, but for my country culture, it's a bit difficult since some things in Enneagram cannot be practiced due to our cultural beliefs, like telling a person the truth about their behavior, the truth hurts.
Yeah.
Very relevant. We kind of slow people who can't give honest feedback if we see it will hurt feelings of receiving person. And yet the corporate world is saying you need to give honest, frank feedback to people. And there's merits in honest and frank feedback, isn't it? But you can see how difficult it is in some cultures, right? The third one, to show this, challenging the leadership and the thought. We need to challenge this existing tradition of leadership. When I teach leadership, the last program I did, I spoke about Simon Sinek's wonderful concept around leaders eat last. So I bought the book and I was excited reading it. And I went and I'm going to tell you a funny story that happened to me. But I was teaching leaders eat last. And when I say this, the immediate response is, nah. In Africa, leaders eat first. Leaders eat first, because that's our status symbol, right? I was in Ghana last year. Joy and I went together, but I was in Ghana and we went to this ladies' conference. It was the ladies' day, and we were the only 3 invited male guests. Me, because I was from South Africa and I was doing the leadership development. The MD of the company, and there was one other male person in the table. Everybody else in the whole room was female, right? The lady who spoke was a parliamentarian, a female parliamentarian. When it was time for us to eat, I remember I just taught my people who were sitting in the audience, leaders in class, right? And so the MC says, can you please allow our guests to go and eat first, to go and dish first? And I'm saying to the MD, I can't go because I just taught these people that leaders eat last. He said, Brian, please go because this is the culture here, otherwise they're not going to start eating. So I called back. But the sense around leaders eating last, we've got to challenge this concept in the Western tradition around leadership and authority, because what's happening in Africa, wherever I go in every country, people want the promotion, they want the corner office, they want the power, they want the privilege, they want the status, they want the knock on the door that says, sir, can I bring you my tea? Or people say, do you have a time for me at 2 o'clock? They want the meeting request from the team member. There's no openness. Once you become a leader, apparently, in Tanzania, in Kenya, in Uganda, the idea is it comes with corner office, it comes with the status symbol. We need to start challenging this, right? And the teaching of the Enneagram is one of the ways in which you can challenge it. Yes?
Does this mean that not many women are becoming leaders?
Does
this mean that not many women are becoming leaders in African corporations?
There is a big mismatch with the number of women we have in corporates versus the number of leaders that we have in corporates. And it's still male dominated, very male dominated. In South Africa, we have a more serious, not more serious, but a bigger problem in that it's not only women, but it's race also gets affected. Given the number of people we have of particular race groups and their representation in the corporate world, it's also evident. All right? And there's a quotation from somebody who gave me feedback. In our culture, people are not able to share their views due to fear of the senior. This program has opened our mind and assists us with the best way to communicate with different people according to the Enneagram without hurting their feelings. So, I'm going to skip some of the slides because of my time. But one of the things I hear people saying to me in the workshops in Africa is, Brian, how can I be like the 8? Can you tell me how can I be like the 3? Because they see that many of the leaders that are given entry positions are 8s and 3s, right? And I've done some rudimentary stats on the people I've worked with, and a number of the leaders, top leaders, are 8s and 3s. So I say to them, yeah, you can get an 8 and a 3 as a leader. Corporates want them, right? Because the 8 can make it happen for you, and the 3 will make sure that they deliver the target. So they'll make it happen for you. So corporates get them. The first year they deliver the role, they'll deliver the target. What happens in the second and third year? Nobody's working for them. Especially if they're unintegrated. Especially that nobody's working for them. And so I'll say to them, look, in every Enneagram type there's leadership gifts.
Yeah.
The clue is to find what those gifts are and to work towards it.
Yeah.
Right? I found this so beautiful from David Aitken. It comes from the CEO of Tanzania, FNB in Tanzania. It's quoted by Beatrice Chestnut in a book, 9, I think it's the 9 leadership style. Huh? He's quoted there. Becoming more conscious means developing the ability to be present and more mindful, to build the internal muscle of noticing where your attention goes, and to be able to regularly observe yourself from a slight distance within your own mind. It's developing the ability to catch yourself in the activity of getting lost in what you're doing, going on autopilot, or just unquestioningly doing things by rote or according to what is familiar and comfortable. And when you catch yourself going to sleep in this way, is being able to wake yourself up and make the conscious choice to do something on purpose through an act of will. Isn't that what leaders should be doing, right? So I teach them these concepts so that people must go away saying, I don't want to be an 8, I don't want to be 3 if I'm a 2 or a 1. Let me be the best 1. Let me be the best 3. Let me be the best 5. So, and the idea is, how can we creatively combine our knowledge of African personality and personhood and work with indigenous collaborative work systems? Here's an example of an indigenous collaborative work system. This is the Nihimbi. Am I pronouncing it right? Right? It's Zimbabwean, it's Shona word, but it's a system, it's a work system, it's a collaborative work system that helps people to work together, handle the tensions, handle problems, and all the while contributing to each other and to the society. I know that in Kenya they've got the Harambee, and in Zambia they've got the Chilimba. If the Enneagram can be coupled with such integrative collaborative work systems, maybe there's something in here for us to take that forward in Africa. Okay? Are you still taking a picture? All right, I'm going to skip some of them. So these are some of the suggestions from participants on how we can take the Enneagram programs more relevant to the country culture. These are directly from the survey I've given them and said to them, what can we do to actually take the Enneagram into Africa? Some people said, look, we need to target more leaders from the private and public sector. We need to start with the Kenya school system in Kenya, to a government and then deal with political parties. Many people said if we can get to the politicians, if we can get to the government, that's where they can start filtering this down. I wrote a letter to Cyril Ramaphosa when he became president saying, I'm offering you the Enneagram to work with your cabinet. I really did that, to work with your cabinet, because his wife and I sit on the same chair, or the same board. And so I could give it to her to give it to him. Haven't heard from him. So I'm not sure whether I will, but let's try.
Should I call it?
SS Parliament members to get them to understand their blind spots.
Yeah.
Inclusion in the school and college curriculum. Translate to Kiswahili to reach large masses of people not in the system. Kiswahili now has become the kind of official language in Eastern Africa, right? Explore elements of earth, fire, water, and air in teaching the Enneagram in Africa. Let young people do it to enable them to select appropriate careers and subjects. And governments can use the Enneagram to facilitate peace in conflict-ridden areas. I'm so excited about the fact that in the Enneagram, I see the way to at least building society, getting peace, helping to address some of the tensions we have in our community and the brokenness in our community. And I'm sure it resonates with you as well, right? So let me close with this little insert. Enjoy.
I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, The mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. My body has frozen in our frosts and in our latter-day snows. It has thawed in the warmth of our sunshine and melted in the heat of the midday sun. The crack and the rumble of the summer thunders, lashed by startling lightning, have been a cause both of trembling and of hope. The fragrances of nature have been as pleasant to us as the sight of the wild blooms of the citizens of the veld. The dramatic shapes of the Dragon's Back, the soil-colored waters of the Likwa, Iqeli, Notugel, and the sands of the Kalahari have all been panels of the set on the natural stage on which we act out the foolish deeds of the theater of the day. At times, and in fear, I have wondered whether I should concede equal citizenship of our country to the leopard and the lion, the elephant and the springbok, the hyena, the black mamba, and the pestilential mosquito. A human presence among all of these, a feature on the face of our native land just defined, I know that none dare challenge me when I say I am an African. I am the grandchild of the warrior men and women that incense Kukuni land. Patriots at Tetwayo and Mpepu took to battle. The soldiers Mushweshwe and Ngumunyane taught never to dishonor the cause of freedom. I am the child of Nongause. I am he who made it possible to trade in the world markets in diamonds and gold and the same food for which our stomachs yearn. Being part of all of these people, and in the knowledge that none dares contest that assertion, I shall claim that I'm an African. Today, it feels good to be an African.
The music is back on. The party has not yet started. Thank you very much.